This is Mike Drow is going to be presenting for you today. Mike, I don't know if you want to say a few words while we let folks.
No, I was just, you kind of said it. I was going to say hello, welcome, good afternoon, good morning. You took away my
sorry.
my speech verbatim. So welcome everyone. People are, as Rachel said, people are still joining into the waiting room, so we'll give them a minute or two to migrate over to the open room, and we'll get started. Thanks again for joining. This is our second meeting of the user group for suppliers, consultants, and technology providers on the Alliance for Parking Data Standards. So the goal today is to talk about the new release that is, I think, coming out next week. And we'll be able to, we're going to go through some of those changes in there, answer any questions that you may have, and go from there. Also, I wanted to introduce Chris Perry, who I think I just saw pop up. Hey, Chris.
Hi, everybody.
Chris has taken a more active role in our user groups. And as we go through today, we're actually asking everyone to raise your hand if you have an interest in participating in a more in-depth level with the standard. As we go through the update today and kind of go through the discussions, you're going to hear a lot of the activities that are going on, and we really could use some help for people who are interested. So as we're going through, please kind of listen with that ear. Is that of something of interest to you professionally or personally, and would you like to get involved? So I don't see any more people coming into the room.
Do I think we're in good shape? The session is designed to be interactive. You don't want to hear Mike for an entire hour. Actually, you do. He's very bright on these subjects, but we'd like you to ask questions. You can do so through the chat, raise your hand, whatever, shoot them, to any one of us privately as well. And we'll get off and running. Thank you so much, Mike.
Yes, thank you. So welcome everyone to our second meeting of the user group for suppliers, consultants, and technology providers. Just so everyone's aware, there is a second user group for people who may use operators and owners, people who would use these data standards or data specifications in their own operations. This user group is more about the entities that help support owners and operators to do stuff. I'm sorry. Pam, you don't have to leave. Someone is chatting me and as always, is causing me grief. So what was the purpose of the standards? There is a lot of data flowing around throughout the globe, and it's touching in a lot of different places. And as you can see up at the top of this diagram are the people that actually buy parking or mobility services, and down at the bottom are the places where those services are delivered. And as you can see in this spaghetti diagram, there are a lot of different entities and individuals and paths to get from where the services are delivered to the people that are buying. And that was really the genesis for identifying the need for data specifications. Every one of those paths today is custom made between groups. And it makes it very expensive and very difficult to support all those integrations. And it probably takes away even from the end user experience as well. And that goes to, so our challenge was, we know we need to share data in a connected world. I mean, and especially through the pandemic, we've seen that increase in need for data sharing. We know lots of entities use different terms and formats to store and send data. It's great that they're sending it, but now you have difference in conflicts to manage that data, and the conflicts create a lot of work, which then go into the entities expending a significant amount of effort and cost to resolve that. If anyone, as all of us as technology providers or as consultants that are working on projects, we know how difficult it is to get two companies to work together. And I would say most of the difficulty is just working through, what does the definition mean? This data doesn't really match up to that definition or that data definition. And that was the genesis again of the specification. It's to make it easier to create, share, and integrate data. A key reminder for this data specification: we aren't defining how people should use the data, and we aren't telling people how they should operate their facilities. This is not an operating specification. This is not a best practices and how to operate a facility, or in how to design software, or how to analyze the software. This specification is purely to enable the equal and quick sharing of data. So allowing two systems to communicate and know that they are sharing a specific piece of information in a specific way. But it's more than just parking data. As we go through some of the examples of where APDS is already engaging, we're getting involved in mobility services. We're getting involved in delivery services. We're even getting involved in robots on sidewalks that are using this standard to help manage and navigate that. And then that goes into all the other uses for sidewalks and curb areas that are out there. A key thing that APDS is focused on, there is not going to be one data specification that governs everything else. Our goal and focus is how to collaborate with other data specifications to ensure that there is some commonality and reducing the amount of confusion or conflict that exists within data specifications. We're doing a lot with the ISO organization right now. First of all, the APDS specification itself is in the final steps of becoming a ISO recognized data specification. There's still several more steps to do, but we're in those final steps. Through that process, we have engaged other ISO work groups that are developing specifications. We've engaged the automated valet parking system that's being run by mainly a lot of the automotive manufacturers. They have incorporated a lot of the data specification into what they're working on. The robots on sidewalks, there is an ISO group that's working on how to manage and communicate and monitor delivery and other robots that will be using sidewalk spaces. How are they going to navigate and transit sidewalk areas? They also are embedding some of the APDS specifications into their work. And you'll also see for our European colleagues, we've been collaborating with DATEX and are in the process of collaborating to redefine Section 6, I believe it's called, or Chapter 6 of the DATEX, which focuses on parking, to more reflect APDS and ensuring that we can support DATEX. So it's going into other collaborations with other specs to ensure that data is there. And again, not trying to replace anyone, not trying to be the specification that is the end all be all, but more importantly, making sure the parking and mobility industry is represented, and that there is a data specification that if we as technology providers or consultants settle on, we know that same data specification is going to already reside or fit within other various data specifications that may be used, again, for like automated valet, delivery robots, etc. So this goes to this. This is that same diagram that you saw before, but it adds in more items in there, because you start doing public transit. We have EV charging. We have micro mobility. So there's a lot more things that we are interacting with, not just parking. And that even goes into the curbside management. And we're going to talk about some of the projects that are underway that are pretty exciting. Any questions or comments? Okay. So let's spend a little time talking about the APDS. First, this is a little bit of a refresher from our last time when we met in March. There were 3 entities that were each working on parking specific data specifications about 4 or 5 years ago. And then in 2017, they decided that it would be more advantageous to work together and pull the resources together. So the European Parking Association, International Parking and Mobility Institute, and the British Parking Association formed APDS to lead this effort on a global basis. And thankfully we did, because I think we have made a lot more progress globally. We were working with Asian entities. Our collaboration with ISO has been very beneficial because of our global exposure and global representation. We're doing a really good job of ensuring that we aren't just developing a specification for one group or one geography. It is considering the needs of multiple entities and multiple industries. In addition, we have several specific entities that we want to call out that have been, for lack of a better term, financial supporters of what's going on. This takes a lot of time and energy, and we use a lot of volunteers, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And you're going to see some of the results of that work. We've got a great website. We have API libraries now that are available. So we want to thank these entities for their participation, but more importantly, for their support and knowledge that they're sharing as they help us to define and develop this specification to make it useful for all of us to use. And I think it also goes to the level of organizations that believe this is the right thing to focus on as well. And in addition to these, we have over 60 other supporting entities. And when we go to the website, I'll show you that those are entities that have agreed that the specification is important and they are in the process of using it within their operations. So some key guiding principles that define what APDS is trying to do and the purpose of the specification. So the most very important one is we are a not-for-profit collaboration with input from industry experts. APDS is not generating profit and it is not trying to control the data. This is APDS is a neutral entity that is trying to take input from all sources, both within parking, within mobility, and outside industries, to put forward a specification that works for all of us. It's no one product, no one solution, no one technology concept is given promotion or a leg up in this data standard. This is an avenue for all of us to. We're developing common data definitions and associations for parking and mobility activities. Again, this is a key thing of what we're trying to do. Again, we do not define what a system should do. We aren't identifying best practices. Our goal is purely to define common data definitions and then how to associate that data together so that people can understand how to use that data in their parking and mobility activities. Specifications enable easier sharing of relevant parking and mobility data. And that really is what our final goal is. We want to enable the easier sharing of the data. And to do that, it requires us to collaborate with external stakeholders as well. And this is where we need help. We have a lot of entities and groups that are reaching out, that are engaging us, that learn more about parking data and how to access it and how to use it in their own systems. And those are just a couple of the ones that we have had heavy dialogue with. The Intelligent Transportation Society or solutions out there, the automotive manufacturers, and the Mobility as a Service. There's been a lot of interaction and dialogue with them. And our goal is to integrate that parking more effectively with those other standards. And again, I gave you some examples of what we're doing with DATEX, the automated valet parking services, and robots as well. A very important point that we want to stress, especially with this user group, APDS is not involved in revenue, is not collecting any revenue. Involved in the data control or activity to private entities to develop commercial businesses that can use and apply data in an effective way that adds value. Again, APDS would like to be used as the data definitions to enable those entities to be more successful in what they're doing. Any questions or comments on the guiding principles? Those are really important to make sure that everyone understands what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to achieve. And again, the bottom one is probably the most important. We want to make sure people recognize There is no desire to control data or to aggregate data by APDS. So this goes into some of the various groups that we're working with already related to various standards and specifications. The behind the scene, the ovals kind of talk about the domains that those various specifications reside in and where they apply. And you'll see APDS just left of center as a starting point. But we've working with entities in Europe on curbside management and traffic regulations specifically. With DataX Part 11 being developed. You can see that we've worked with DataX2 and we've collaborated with NetX and Transmodel as well on how to better collaborate across those specifications to make it easier for entities to do things. So there is a lot of involvement and engagement, and this again is an area where we need help. And I hope this illustrates that specific area of domain. And we aren't going to be a data specification that covers all of those various things. There are many other very relevant and valid specifications, but where we can connect and ensure commonality of data terms, that's our goal, because that'll just make it easier and more useful to use our data and our systems today to support those other ovals. And again, as we become a more connected world, we know parking management is going into curbside management. We know parking management has a role in traffic management and mobility and traveler information systems. So we've already seen that, and that's going to continue to grow and expand. So I'm going to stop real quick before we go into the specification itself. Any comments, questions, or thoughts that people have? And again, this is meant to be a user group, not a webinar, and I definitely don't want to be the one talking all the time. Any thoughts or comments? Okay, so even my begging won't help. Great. We'll keep going then. And but please, if you have a question or even a thought and would like to raise a point, feel free to jump in. We'd love to talk about it. So this is the current domain. As you received in your email this morning or today, I should say, Release 3.0 is coming out. There were some significant enhancements in Release 3.0. And that was really through the work of collaborating with DataX, through the ISO collaborations, as well as receiving feedback from various members of groups that are already trying to deploy and implement the data specification in their operations or in their systems. This is the Release 3.0 view of the data domains that are covered. And if you read the overview document, it goes into a lot more detail on each of these. So I encourage you to look at it. It's a long document. I think it's about 20 pages. So there's a lot of information in there. But it's a lot shorter than the other three specification documents that exist, which are probably about 400 to 500 pages in total. So a lot of good information in all of those. So the data domains, the key data domains are place, which is how we describe the physical location of an operation. That may be a loading zone on a curb. It may be a parking garage. It may be a level within a parking facility. And then you can see some of the elements that are associated to place underneath that. Rights data, which is probably it's a very significant element of this data specification. Rights are the permissions that are granted to people. You may have a permission to park. You may have a permission to load or unload. You may have a permission to do a delivery. You may have a permission to transit a certain area. The rights are key because you have to be given that permission before you can be charged to do something. And then within a right, you have to be eligible to even receive that right. So what are examples of eligibility? It may be on a university campus. You have to be a student. in a residential building, you have to be a resident to have the right to park or have the right to offer guest parking. So those are some of the elements that are in the rights data, and then it defines how to document a right and how to share and communicate that right. Right data also gets down to who's been issued the right, so who's the specific customer, as well as basic financial data as well, whether it's monthly parking fees, reservation fees, parking fees, loading, unloading fees, delivery service fees. Rates data then goes into, obviously, rate information. This is how is the right charged, and various rights have different fee structures. I may have public parking, I may have a residential parking, and I may have tenant parking. And each of those have different rates applied to them. All of that is captured in the rates, and you can now, hopefully you can clearly see, rights and rate data together is what we would typically expect to see out of a lot of our parking systems or mobility systems that we are using. A new data domain developed for the release 3.0 is the quote data. And this was a significant one because as the world becomes more connected, we saw a lot of need for entities that are trying to figure out the rights and rates data, but don't want to have to store all of that data on their servers to calculate what it costs to do things. So the quote data allows an entity to make a request with certain criteria, such as here's the customer, here's the time of the time and end date that they would like to perform an activity, here's the permission that they're requesting, and here's the facility. And then it allows a response to be returned that includes various rights and rates combinations that are available to that entity or to that user for those specific times. And that can be done on a new quote, or it can be used to extend an existing session or transaction. So that's all defined in the quote data now. And that was a pretty big add to help support our connected world. Occupancy data, we've always broken it into the supply side, like how many spaces are available, and then demand side, how many are actually being used today. And a key part of our occupancy utilization data is the idea of precision and how is the data being collected. So on the demand side, I may have a facility that on a one time a day goes out and manually counts all the cars. The demand data in the specification allows someone to indicate this data is only collected once every 24 hours. Conversely, someone may have sensors in their facility that are pooling the space or detecting the space multiple times a second. That information can be used. And that allows an entity to understand how accurate that data is or how precise that data is and how fresh is the data, which then really it becomes useful as we get into forecasting. We have our session data, which is basically transactions. A session is when a right is actually being used. So when someone enters a parking garage and leaves a parking garage, there's a whole bunch of session data associated with that that shows start time, end times, rates applied, etc. And then we finally have observation data. And observation data is a way for us to capture information about things that are being observed in our environment. When a mobile LPR vehicle drives down a street, it's making multiple observations. When a person enters a garage and presents their RFID tag, that's an observation. When a person drives by a Bluetooth device and the Bluetooth device picks up the phone, that's an observation. We have the ability to collect and communicate all of this observation data, which then may be used in various operations. An example would be if an entity has granted a right to someone to park in an on-street environment, and then there is observation data that says, I see a license plate in a specific zone, you can then compare the observation data to the right to say, is this person authorized to park or is an enforcement action required? And again, that's done by the other systems, but the data is here to explain it. And then the final two other areas.
That was one of my questions.
Yeah.
Would that be in the credential data in the rights, that LPR, that plate would be
Yes.
a authorized credential? The observation would be, I saw it, and now we make a decision. Are we okay or are we not?
That's correct. And this is again goes to where the APDS specification doesn't define how you do that match, but an entity could take observation data, compare it to its right data, and then decide on what action is necessary. And again, that's where the systems make those decisions, but the data is here and available.
But to be just further on that, you'll have a license plate theoretically in two portions of a database. What APDS is trying to do is organize where I'm seeking a plate for certain decisions, one being observation, one being credentialing. So I'm not pulling the wrong plate from the wrong field type thing.
Exactly. We know that there was an observation made because that observation data could be used for occupancy information. That observation data it could be used for multiple different sources. And what we're trying to say is here is that data element. Now, how you use that data element is up to each system. Yep. Thank you for that. So the final two are the PK common data. That is just a general term, and this is much more technical. It is data elements that are used across all of the different domains. So to help simplify the data structure, we put those into a common area. And then to reflect the acceleration and use of EV charging and other energy sources and infrastructure, we've created a new domain to help capture and define relevant data elements related to energy and infrastructure, such as battery charging or charging units, etc. And again, that collaborating with other entities to ensure that there is some synchronicity with what other people are doing in their data specs. So let's talk about release 3.0. The documents are done. You saw the overview document. The other three documents, which include an information model, which go into a significant amount of more detail on the data specification. It goes into each domain in detail, is one document. We have a data dictionary, which defines every data element, provides a definition, and how to store that data is included. That's another very large document. And then we also have a use case document, which shows various applications of the specification in very common use cases. Those three documents are going to be released next week, and they will be available for comment through mid-July. So we'll be looking for your comments and ideas. Once we receive those comments, we will take that and finalize release 3.0 into a final version, which I would expect to happen sometime in August or September. So please be on the lookout for those documents, and we would appreciate, especially everyone in this group's comments and input on them to help us to refine and perfect them, and to, more importantly, clarify any ambiguities that may exist in the documents. So what are some of the big improvements in the release 3.0? Well, we'll just go through each domain. Within place, we clarified several data terms, and there were some ambiguous terms that were being used or terms that were too similar to other terms. We clarified those and cleaned that up to help improve the readability and understanding of the document. We expanded the identified area specialization. So within a place, you have the ability to segment a garage into smaller and smaller areas. So you can go through hierarchy elements. You can create a garage, then you can create levels, and then within levels, you can create sections of the level all the way down to a space. Originally, the identified area was a vehicular access and then just a general use for mainly parking. We added a second one called supplemental facility services, and this was really in collaboration with the DADEX and what their needs were. In a supplement or in a facility, there are areas of the facility that have other uses. It may have restrooms, showers, convenience stores, repair facilities. And this was really put in to help initially to support truck stops and those sort of things, so that when you're looking at a place, you know where you can park. I can identify other services that are available within that facility. So through this identified area specialization, we can now identify, here is an area of the facility, and here are the the supplemental uses of that facility or the services, again, rest areas, etc. We also have within the supplemental facility the ability to identify specific infrastructure equipment being used, the ability to define charging stations, the ability to define parking equipments like lane devices or readers as an entity may need. Again, this is not required to be put in. This is information that if an entity wants to share it, they have the ability to do that. We then took the existing vehicular access and we expanded it to support roadways. Originally, the vehicular access was really just the driveway that to enter a parking facility. We described, was it an in or was it an out, or was it bi-directional by time of day? Describe the height and everything else related to that entry to the facility. As I said, we expanded it to support roadways. And this was to support the idea that to get to parking, sometimes it's more than just a driveway. Maybe there's a certain route that you need to take. Dadex needed it to support their truck stops because not all of their truck stops were off the immediate highway or roadway surface, that you had to take a couple of different roads to get to the truck stop. But as we went through that, we also recognized that is very useful for entities that are managing events. Maybe for certain events, you want certain roadways to be used to enter certain facilities. So we now have that ability to capture that within the APDS standard. We also expanded the use of user-defined codes to support occupancy utilization. So the best example is the concept of a red, a yellow, and a green to say, what is the occupancy levels of my facility? And because they're user-defined, you can define what colors you're using or what numbers you're using, as well as what is the definition of each number. So garage A may say red is if I have a utilization of 95% or higher. Garage B may say my red utilization is 90% or higher. So we have the ability to allow those to be user defined and communicated so that people understand what is your utilization codes mean and how to use it. The final update in place is we expanded the use of organizations and contacts to provide more usability and sharing of data related to that, whether it's support teams, transit, operations, operating owners, and who the specific contacts might be. If you have an emergency issue, here's a number to call. If it's an administrative issue, here's a number to call. If it's a contract issue, here's a number to call. So those are the uses of place. I'm seeing that there is a question out here, so I'm going to ask it. Is there any plan to have a standard rate engine using APDS? Or does anyone know of an open source rate engine using APDS? So APDS will never define a standard rate engine, but if you look at the specification, it describes a standard way to describe rates and eligibility for that rate. I do know that there are entities that are leveraging the APDS data specification into their rate engines, and so that when people make a request for a quote, they can communicate that information in a common way. I'll open it up to other people to know or talk about any known open source rate engines that are out there. Anyone aware of any open source rate engines or and I will show in a little bit of time, we're going to show an example of a city that's creating a parking platform that it's probably not so much a rate engine, but it's definitely sharing rates. So it may get to your question. There's another question. Does APDS also support deep links for mobile apps? Yes, it does. So we have the ability within the place definitions, as well as I believe in the rights, to include links to specific mobile apps if you need to. So, or basically any web URL. So for rates, the big changes in 3.0, again, is we added more user-defined codes for vehicle types and vehicle load types. So this is really getting to, Is it a person or a cargo in the vehicle? And that could be further expanded into, is it hazardous waste, or I'm sorry, hazardous material cargo, et cetera. And that was to support qualifications. So whether, if you're granting a right or the ability for someone to park or to do loading, you have the ability to kind of create your own user-defined codes for your special operations to support various vehicle types and vehicle loading. As well as we've added emissions now as a qualification. Definitely with our European colleagues, that is a necessity. And in the North America, we're seeing an inclination more and more towards considering emissions. And emissions may be as simple as, are you an EV car, or do you have zero emissions or not? But that is now built into the rates as a qualification to show various rates and rights as well. In the right, not a lot of significant changes in the right, other than that we moved financial transaction data, which was originally in the session data domain. We moved it to the assigned right. And an assigned right is a right that's been issued to an individual or a vehicle for specific use. So now that financial transaction data is there. And that was done to support both transient activity as well as contract activity. So if someone buys, the specific example would be, someone buys a monthly parking pass, they've been given an assigned right of 160 euro to park for a month period. That's now on the assigned right, so that it's easier to attach and see the financial relationships to that assigned right. When we were going through the examples in sessions, it got very confusing, and obviously it broke down, and that's why we made the change. I talked about quote. That's a new domain that's entered in release 3.0, and it allows the ability for entities to issue and track quotes between their systems. Quotes can have expiration dates. They have IDs, so that people can also track the issuance of a quote. If it's accepted in the time frame before it expires, you can see how it translates into an assigned right, as well as into sessions as well. So the data can be tracked, and you can see how a quote migrates all the way to an active use of an assigned right. Some other good improvements, and I'm going to jump over to the website here in a second. We've created an API library of very common uses of the APDS spec. Those are available on the website, and you can are welcome to access those. Again, those are I would call those best practices for messaging. We are not prescribing a specification specific API yet. And we'll see if the world needs us to. We want to make sure that everyone knows that everyone uses the data specification, and the data definitions are defined in common. But how entities use the messaging, we recognize that there are special cases, and then people will probably take best practice messaging and morph it to their specific needs. But we are proposing best practice messaging because we also know that it's useful sometimes to have a starting place. And all of these messages are currently being used in various platforms around the globe. And I'm going to talk about those in a second. The other key part of the release 3.0, and this goes into the goal of the user groups, is a discussion forum. The key about the APDS spec, it is really about how to help all of us better integrate and share data amongst ourselves. And to ensure that there is good communication and discussion, we created a discussion forum to allow people to ask questions, to share information of what they're working on, and to gain insight from other people. So bear with me, I'm going to jump over to the website right now. Okay, here it comes. So here's our new website. If you haven't been to the website in the last 2 or 3 months, you're going to see a significant overhaul. It's a much more useful website with information much easier to find. So you can kind of see the various entities. Actually, I need to remind myself to log out first. So it does require a login for the forums and to request information. Otherwise, a lot of the other stuff is free. I encourage you guys to sign up and look at it. So as I go through a couple of the things, you can kind of see the events that are coming up, what we're doing to promote it. You can see our sessions here. We'll be adding other ones in the future. We obviously want people to get involved. So please tell us if you have an interest. On the specification, this is where you can go to the specifications today and see all the detail for them. So this is a GitHub. Again, this is very technical, but you're welcome to go to use it, look at it, and explore it, and pull information about it there. Sorry, let me go back. Also within our specifications, this will be updated to requesting version 3.0 here. And then you can submit your feedback and questions in here. We also have our resources available to you. So there are video libraries, and we'll have training materials coming out shortly as well. We have, I believe they're in here. Let me sign up now and jump in. So this is where you need to be logged in. So we have multiple videos in here of different training stuff and overviews of various documents that we encourage you to use and leverage as well. And then finally is our forum that we've just launched, and we're looking for people to start getting engaged and using it to share information. There's general discussion area, APDS specifications, or other standards that you would like us to engage on. So we're looking forward to people coming in here, participating, and growing it. And then finally, what I wanted to do was show you all the APDS supporters. So we've already kind of seen the sponsors, but here is just a list of the entities that have already signed up and said yes, they are going to use this in their operations, and are asking their vendors, or as a vendor, are going to be promoting it in their solutions. So this gets updated almost every day. I know every week there's new people added to it. So and you can see it's great because it's a very much a global perspective, which shows that we are getting a lot of engagement from various folks. With that, Rachel, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add about the website that I may have missed, because this is a really important resource for everyone to use.
No, it just takes a few seconds to create a profile, so don't let that be a barrier. What that allows us to do is we don't want to send you a version of the documents and then not be able to send you the next version or an important technical communication. So that allows us to collect all that kind of good stuff there. We are not frequent emailers. We only send you the things that are, sort of really important from a technical standpoint. The supporters get updated about weekly, just because it's, a manual process. We want to make sure that it's all correct. And you can check out the forum and start to kind of chat. To Mike's point, the most important part of the community, it's not the documents, it's the people. So that's where the conversation comes from. That's where the shared, using your use cases, your program examples, even your challenges and, difficulties when you're applying the standard. Obviously, it's not an overnight fix, as Mike has talked about. So feel free to reach out to me with anything that you need on the website. I am not your technical contact. I am your marketing and communications contact. But Mike and Chris are, of course, always available to you for those items too. But if you find something that we could improve, please absolutely let me know.
And Chris, I don't know if you have anything else to add, because again, what we've asked Chris to do is to kind of help us develop and further expand the use of these user groups to make them useful to everyone. As Rachel said, it is the community that we're trying to develop, and through the community, we'll perfect the data specification to meet the needs of both the parking industry, the mobility industry, as well as those industries that need to interact with us. So I don't, Chris, anything else to add or share?
No, I guess maybe a question for the group is outside of the educational aspect of meetings like today, what can we do as a group to move the ball downfield? I think the framework is there. I think the idea of why APDS is there. But if we as suppliers or municipalities, I guess it's on us to kind of put things in action. So, like I say, question for the group: is there anything that we could be doing together or for the group to help move things forward?
Chris, I'll jump in here. Paul Dillon. I don't know if I'm going to answer that question that you posed, but I'm in a very similar work group, just starting out as well with Open Mobility Foundation, and it's a pretty large group, and we're looking at curb zones, and I would imagine there's some crossovers between this group and that group, or vice versa. So I was just curious if you guys have had conversations and talked about similar goals.
Yeah, I can comment on that. We actually presented to the Open Mobility Foundation back in February. Sweet. And it's actually on my task list to reach out to Michael and the team to re-engage and make sure that we can collaborate and identify those areas where common use of data terms can be effective. Again, I think what the OMF is doing is really fantastic. There's some good stuff going on there, and our goal would be to collaborate with them to make sure there aren't any conflicts with data terms, because that would be, I think, detrimental to both initiatives. So look for more to come on that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Anything else about the website anyone wanted to see? Otherwise, I'm going to jump over to a different document. Again, go out to it. It's a lot of great resources on there. So take a look, and we're going to work on ways to start to get activity going on the forum to share. The other document that you received today was the overview document. I just very quickly wanted to go through again. It's a long document, but it is a shorter version of the information model that you'll be able to download. This is a very good document to give you good orientation to what's going on. So I encourage you to look at it. You'll see a lot of the same material that we've talked about, but again, it goes into a lot more detail on the places and the various data domains to give you a little bit more structure and understanding of what's in the data specification. So take a look at that. And again, if you have questions, reach out to myself or Chris. We'd be glad to help. And there are actually other folks that I think you can find them on the website that are technical resources that can help as well. All right. So back to the presentation. So that's kind of what's in release 3.0 now, and it's a pretty significant enhancement, and it was really through our efforts of working with ISO and the various groups on ISO, as well as with DATEC. So we're looking forward to what comes out of it. So what I wanted to do now was go into some of the actual use cases that are being developed with APDS. And there are several entities that are creating parking platforms. This is one that's being built that is built, I should say, in the city of Manchester, in the UK. The city wanted to aggregate all their data and to ensure that they had visibility into what was going on, and as well to make sure that there was availability for all of their constituents. You'll see the blue box is the actual platform. To the left and to the right of it, though, shows you where the APDS standards fit in. APDS did not build the platform. It is just the standards are being used to bring data in and to distribute data out. And that's exactly the intent of what we're trying to build. And I hope that clarifies for consultants and technology providers and suppliers about how your businesses and your commercial offerings fit into this. We aren't trying to replace, we aren't trying to tell you how to run your business or how to build your solutions. We are only talking about the interface and how data is shared between the two. We want data coming out of the various parking operators to be sent in a certain way so that it can be absorbed in this platform. and then that platform can distribute it to the various other service providers. And so when you're looking on the left side, that could be, various parks equipment or proprietary accounting software that each of these entities is using. And that's the goal of it. So this is actually up and running, and it's continuing to expand. I believe there are at least 1 or 2 other cities in the UK that are looking at it. And I know I've been in talks with some cities in New Zealand and in Australia as well that are looking to do similar things. In the US, we have similar programs underway. Several cities are developing similar sort of parking programs or platforms as well. So these are just examples of how the APDS interface is being used. And again, the 2 columns left and right of the center box really illustrate where the standard fits into it versus the software. Where is this all going? This is the ultimate plan for specifically the city of Manchester, and I know other cities as well. They want to turn it into a curbside management platform where they're managing their off-street, their on-street, and various uses of those spaces. It's not just for parking. It could be for delivery services. It could be for TNCs as examples. So multiple uses around mobility and parking that are all being merged into one platform, or I should say through platforms to enable the sharing. But again, the APDS interface is there just to help simplify how data is communicated, because as all of us know, different definitions can create significant challenges with data if we all think that the same definitions are being applied. Any comments or questions on these use cases, this use case? Okay. So steps to adopt the specification. So on this group and in this user group, it's consultants, it's technology providers, and service providers. I can tell you with the user group that's around owners and operators, one of the things that we're talking to them about for adopting the specification is do not expect technology vendors to do it overnight. This is going to take time, have specific goals in place, and work with each of you to talk about that migration. What are your objectives? What are you trying to achieve? And then move forward. The other thing that we tell them is, or what we told the owners operators is, do not expect them to rewrite their system. The APDS standard does not define how a system should work. It's just on the communication of data. So if you have an entity that tells you you need to design your system to support APDS, do not interpret that as meaning you need to rewrite your system. All that really needs to happen is when you bring data out of your system, you understand your data definitions that are being used, and you can translate your data definitions in a way that fits within the APDS data definition so that information can be communicated. We do not expect, nor are we encouraging people to rewrite their systems to be APDS compliant. Being APDS compliant means you can share your data and you can accept that data using the common definitions. It means you've gone through the exercise to understand the data definitions and how to interpret them and load data in your system. So I think the key steps for all of us, definitely for the technology providers, is to understand how our systems are being used and what are the data definitions that are being used. And that'll probably be, in many cases, a case-by-case discussion with each of your customers. I know when I was with a national parking operator, each of our facilities actually had different data definitions, unfortunately. What one entity called a validation, another entity may have called something slightly different. How rates were defined were differently. So there's going to be a collaboration for the technology providers and their customers to define data definitions for each operation more likely. And then over time, we'll be able to morph to a common data definition. Probably another key step is for technology providers to think through what are their intended data definitions and start to communicate that when implementing new systems so that the data definition or data dictionary for that site is already defined, which will make it easier to be APDS compliant. Consultants, I think, play a big role in this as well. helping entities, both the technology providers and the owner operators, to navigate these data definitions and how to share that data is going to be very critical. And again, the goal is going to be, in the end, we're going to improve the data sharing, and hopefully we all will spend less time and resources trying to understand how two systems should work and spending more of those dollars on innovating new solutions that add value to both our customers and society in general. I'll stop there and let people comment on tactics or ideas or challenges that they foresee that would be worth talking about. And I can share you from my side. I work for a technology provider. We're in the process. Some of our systems have been written with the understanding of the APDS spec, and we're trying to share information in a common way. But we have systems that were written 10, 15, 20 years ago that we are still working through to understand those data definitions. And then in many of our sites, clients use our system in different ways. And so with each of those clients, when they talk to us about being APDS, we have to sit with them and understand what does their data mean, and what do they want it to mean. And invariably, I know in some of the conversations, we've already learned that sometimes the customer didn't really understand what that data definition was. So there will be some work here. It is not going to be a quick one, but there's definitely challenges to migrating to this specification. Any other thoughts? Okay. So we kind of talked about this. Understanding your data is the most important step, and even with the owner operators, this is what we told them was pretty critical. So comparing the APDS data definitions to their own existing data definitions, they're probably going to find that they are using their definitions slightly different than these common definitions as proposed. And the key is to understand if you have differences, what does your data element mean? What does it mean when someone says that car is parked? And why that may seem basic, for many of us that have been on the technology side trying to run data reports, as soon as you try to look at the data, you start to see anomalies in the data, and then you start to understand, like, oh, that's not really what park your car means. There are some variations to it, and starting to understand that is a critical step. And then documenting those differences. Once you've documented the differences, you're really in a position now where you can start to use the APDS specifications to start to share data, because you're going to understand what you need to do to convert or translate that data in an APDS compliant way, so that when other people receive that data, they know what they're receiving and will be able to use that more effectively. And again, this just goes back to discussing data definitions with your customers. I think as you set up your systems, having that discussion could be very useful and may eventually even help reduce some of the reporting challenges that I know, if you're in the technology business, have always faced when a customer says, my report's not telling me what it's supposed to tell me. Well, we implemented what you said you wanted implemented, but so hopefully that'll also be a useful tool for us to improve customer satisfaction with the many systems out there that do a great job, but were implemented in a way that were maybe cross-purposed with what the intent of the system was. We expect customers are going to start setting expectations. There are multiple entities already that are including language such as this in their RFPs. Again, there is no certification for the Alliance for APDS yet. I think that's a discussion for this user group. What we don't want to do, and it's something that's been discussed about at the board, we don't want to create a certification that just increases costs for everyone. There's no benefit in that. But we also don't want entities to take advantage of saying they're APDS compliant when they haven't done any of the work, and they're just creating confusion in the marketplace and actually making it harder for those entities that are collaborating and see the value in the specification and who have committed the resources to make an improvement. So I would expect that this user group is going to provide a lot of guidance into us of how do we effectively self-manage ourselves and what tools and mechanisms are worthwhile to implement to ensure compliance. You know, how do we want to do that? Is it something, what do consultants do? What do the technology providers do? How do we want to do that? So I expect that'll be a conversation over the coming months as we think about it. But we should all start to expect to see this in RFPs. I believe Mike King is on, and I like to pick on him because Mike, about a year or maybe even 2 years ago, started putting this in a language like this into City of Sacramento RFPs. So yeah, there you are, Mike. If you could just talk about it again, that would be great.
Certainly. Because the City of Sacramento is so tech heavy in its parking environment, and an enormous amount of data is generated and shared between the City of Sacramento and its providers, and between the providers even, the city wanted to make sure that it was looking forward. So even though the standard is not yet ratified, the city did include language in all RFPs moving forward that the providers were expected to move to using the APDS at the standpoint, or at the time point where the standard was ratified. We understood that it would take them a little bit of time to be able to transition to using it, but we set that as an expectation, and the language is pretty much what you see in that second bullet there.
Thanks, Mike. So
You're welcome.
Any comments or concerns about seeing this in RFPs?
Mike, what kind of questions did you get from potential respondents to the RFP to that language, if any?
I think it was a surprise for them, but in general, they agreed that they would look into incorporating APDS in any data communications.
And I can share with you my experience with the stuff that's going on in the UK with that national platform. And I actually think some of the there are some representatives of some of those companies participating in that. In the beginning, there was a little bit of concern about what is all of this, but in the end, as we look at just the data specification being about sharing information, hopefully people are seeing the benefit and the reduced cost to support that sharing of data. All of us in the technology or in the technology service providers know we need to share data with other people. There is never going to be a single system that does everything. So it's in all of our best interest to figure out ways to share information in a reliable and cost-efficient way. And so hopefully that'll be a benefit to us. And which is why the APDS, again, I want to stress, is not defining the best practices or the best ways of how a system should work. I mean, that comes to each of the technology providers out there have value propositions that are theirs, that are important to them, and they should maintain those. And hopefully you can enhance your value propositions by leveraging a common data specification, because you'll be able to interact with more entities with various data out there. Okay. So the APDS community, and that we went through all the stuff that's been going on out there. Thanks for some of the questions that came in. And now we get back to the user groups and what we're trying to do. We wanted to stress APDS is industry led. It is based on our needs and our priorities. So we really are looking for the community to engage, to tell us what needs to be done, to tell us where there are shortfalls, to tell us where things aren't going the way that are creating value for the industry or for the individuals as well. And through that, your input and insight, we're going to help drive value from the specification. Again, we're trying to not give anyone an advantage. It is meant to create a level playing field, not just within the parking industry, but for the parking industry to engage with other industries, whether it's automotive, intelligent transportation systems, mobility as a service, delivery and freight services. I mean, we're seeing a lot of interaction with lots of different industries that are asking for engagement with us. And that goes to, so we need your participation in the community, whether it's engaging in the forums, engaging and helping us out and to collaborate with other standards. We're really looking for your help and guidance and insight to improve where this is going. And so that goes to the user groups, and I will let Chris kind of talk about the user groups and what we're trying to do with them. Chris?
Sure. So as I said earlier, I mean, my thought process with the user group is not only to continue the education, provide the forum for the feedback that Mike discussed earlier, but also decide amongst the group what actions or initiatives that we would like to see so we can further things. Mike showed an example earlier about Sacramento using it within an RFP, and that's kind of the I guess the pull side of things. You know, the cities are going to require us to do certain things, but I guess from a group side, you know, we can move the ball down the field as well. So again, kind of a question to the group, you know, what do we do next besides continue the feedback and the adjustments and the educational effort to make this more of a reality than it is now? Mike, and what were your thoughts? I know it's a group, but what was your long-term view or medium-term view of what we could do together in advance of, I think we talked about meeting in the fall again with something similar as this. But what can the group do to help us at APDS?
Yeah, I think it's engaging in the documents. I think if we can get a lot of public comment, make sure that the specification is, like, unambiguous. That's the key for us is it understandable? Does it make sense? Is it usable? We're getting some great examples, like I said, from some of the parking platforms that are being created, but we want more input, especially with entities that are engaging with other industries. So that's a key one. First one would be, like I said, providing comments on this release 3 candidate. We would love to hear your input. Spending time then going through the APIs and sharing what's working, what's not working, and ideas that you've identified where you've gotten improved performance from the APIs or have accomplished specific things. I think the more the community can share what they're doing and how they're using the specification to enable new innovations and enable new services is a great way to share it, because while it helps us within the industry, it is surprising to me how many outside of our industry want access to our data. I mean, it doesn't go without every couple of weeks we're getting a request for help to engage other industries. Like I said, you know, freight and transportation are ones that have been coming up more and more as well. So those would be the initial ones. And longer term, I think just having more people participating and communicating about the specification so that we are engaged with other specs that are out there and making sure that we're collaborating. So that volunteer side is pretty critical.
So besides the feedback on the standards, would it be helpful to have some feedback on difficult integrations, historical problems that maybe we haven't thought through to address, or
that's a great idea,
could help
Chris.
the APDS kind of help post-mortem what had happened, or why
I think
it could have been easier.
That's a great idea. You know, if someone's come across a really difficult data interface challenge, present it up in a forum or send it to Chris, myself, and we'll get folks to kind of work on it and identify how it could have been solved or better supported through the APDS specification. That is a fantastic idea. And we can include that in use case documents, because that's a key part of this, is giving people kind of recipes, if you will, of how to handle different situations that they may be experiencing in real time. So we'll throw that out to the group, Chris's idea. Send us your most challenging interface, and then we'll see what we can do as a community to define it via the APDS specification. All right, so at the end of this user group, appreciate everyone's time. Again, please go out to the website, download the data, take a look at the API frameworks. We welcome and are interested in your comments on the APIs, what you like, what you don't like. Please engage in the forum, and then again, we'll ask you to send us your most complicated interface to see if how APDS specification could have been developed or applied to support that going forward. With that, any last comments or questions? All right then. Well, thank you very much for your time. Look for future events to be coming out. Please download release 3.0, which should be available next week. And we'd love to hear your comments on that as well. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.